Hi, boys and girls. This is Novel Studies for Monday, the 11th. And this week we are going to try something new and we're going to do novel studies a little bit differently. I think we're really missing out on the discussion part, which is the best part really about novel studies, where I get to hear your ideas. And a lot of you, I think, process the story a lot better when you hear your friends' ideas and we discuss the characters. So, today, I'm just going to quickly run through our chapter vocabulary as review since it's a new week. I'm going to recap chapter 8 so we have the context of where our story is. And going forward, we're going to start chapter 9 together. Now, on Wednesday, we are going to meet together in small groups. Instead of having optional office hours, I'm changing that to basically reading groups. And we'll all do the same thing, but instead of meeting all at once, we'll meet in small groups so that we can actually discuss the chapter like we do at school and hopefully enrich your experience with the novel, okay? So having said all that, let's get started. So last week we worked a lot on your dictionary dive and we practiced a little bit with the terms. So hopefully the Spelling City activities are helping you to recognize the terms and connect them with their meaning. So we have preoccupied, busy with something else. For example, in class, if I see one of you playing with an eraser and I notice that you're preoccupied with your eraser, I might ask you to put it away so you can concentrate on what we're doing. Paupers. Paupers is a old-fashioned word for people who are poor or maybe down and out. When you see people, like for example, in old movies, a pauper might be walking around with tattered clothing and maybe a tin can at the train station asking for money. It's just another way of describing someone who's very poor. Okay? Bequeathing, or to bequeath, is to leave something of value behind. When you die and you pass away, you usually bequeath your special belongings to your family, and if you don't have any family, then maybe a favorite charity. So that's what that is. A caper. Caper is a crazy plan or a scheme. And basically our characters, Claudia and Jamie, their whole experience for them is a caper. They decide to run away from home and live in a museum and go all over the city by themselves. This is definitely an example of a caper. Intrigued. Something that grabs your attention or your curiosity. We became very intrigued about birds while we were studying birds, and we started to notice birds all around us, and we were intrigued by bird songs and started wondering, which bird is that? Right? So something that pulls your interest. Okay. And maimed or maim is just another word for a really bad injury. Something that more than a little scratch. If you're maimed, you might really hurt your limb and not be able to use it anymore, or perhaps you could really, a limb is the best example because it doesn't harm you so much that you may die or pass away, but is a permanent injury. Maiming is serious. Okay, so hopefully you're starting to become more familiar with those words as we practice them. Chapter 8, where did we leave off? Well, basically it was all about building up to see what the museum wrote back to Claudia and Jamie about the statue, right? And they go to their safe deposit box and they finally get their letter, and it is a huge disappointment, right? Basically, the museum says, thank you very much, mystery people, but we pretty much already know everything that you said, and we're having our experts check it out, and when we know, we'll let you know. We'll announce it. So Jamie's reaction to that is, all right, it's time to go home. That's it. Let's get out of here. Let's go home. And Claudia's reaction is, no way. We cannot go home now after that huge disappointment and empty-handed and without some big discovery. We cannot go home now. So very last minute, who does she decide to go visit? But the star of our show and the title of our book, Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. So they buy their train ticket, they hop on the train, they get in a cab, and we leave that end of that chapter with the kids speeding off to meet her and to talk to her, okay? So I'm going to turn to page 9. If you do not have your novel and you've just been sitting here listening to me this whole time, thank you. But could you please pause it here and go get your novel so that you can track along with me, okay? And I'm going to start on page 124 with chapter 9. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit. Chapter 9 is a long one, so we'll work through it together and discuss it on Wednesday when we meet in small group, okay? All right. Up the entire length of my long, wide, tree-lined road they came. Do you suppose that Mrs. Frankweiler owns the highway? Jamie asked. The taxi driver answered, "This ain't no highway. It's all her property. I tell you, this dame's loaded. In front of the house, this here begins to resemble what you call a normal driveway." Claudia discovered that indeed it does. My tree-lined avenue circles in front of my house. Jamie looked up at my house and said, "Another museum?" Claudia answered, "Then we should feel very much at home." Jamie paid the taxi driver. Claudia pulled his arm and whispered, "Tip him." Jamie shrugged his shoulders and gave the driver some money. The driver smiled, took off his hat, bowed from the waist, and said, "Thank you, sir." After he drove away, Claudia asked, "How much did you give him?" Jamie answered, "All I had." "That was stupid," Claudia said. "Now how are we going to get back?" Jamie sighed. "I gave him 17 cents, so it wasn't such a great tip. Also, it would never be enough to get us back. We're broke. How do you feel about that, Miss Taxi Rider?" "Pretty uncomfortable," she murmured. "There's something nice and safe about having money." "Well, Claude, we just traded safety for adventure. Come along, Lady Claudia." "You can't call me Lady Claudia anymore. We're paupers now." They ascended the low, wide steps of my porch. Jamie rang the bell. Parks, my butler, answered. "We'd like to see Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler," Jamie told him. "Whom shall I say is calling?" Claudia cleared her throat. "Claudia and James Kincaid. Just one moment, please." They were left standing in the reception hall. More than one moment, please, before Parks returned. "Mrs. Frankweiler says she doesn't know you." "Well, we would like her to," Claudia insisted. "What is the nature of your business?" he asked. "Parks always asks that." Both hesitated. Jamie decided on an answer first. "Please tell Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler that we are seeking information about the Italian Renaissance." Parks was gone a full 10 minutes before his second return. "Follow me," he commanded. "Mrs. Frankweiler will see you in her office." Jamie winked at Claudia. He felt certain that mentioning the Italian Renaissance had intrigued me. They walked behind Parks through my living room, dining room, and library. Rooms so filled with antique furniture, oriental rugs, and heavy chandeliers that you complain that they are also filled with antique air. Well, when a house is as old as mine, you can expect everything in it to be thickened by time. Even the air. My office surprised them after all this. It surprises everyone. You once told me, Saxenberg, that my office looks more like a laboratory than an office. That's why I call what I do here research. I suppose it does look like a lab, furnished as it is with steel, formica, vinyl, and light by fluorescence. You must admit, though, that there's one feature of the room that looks like an office. That's the rows and rows of filing cabinets that line the walls. Okay. Oh, sorry. I paused you and I didn't mean to. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. So if some of you were following along, you'd see that there was a moment there where I added a word where I shouldn't have. So hopefully you're tracking because you guys love to correct me when I make a mistake, right? Basically, we did talk about some of our vocabulary words. I think we covered intrigued. Mrs. Frankweiler was intrigued by the Italian Renaissance. And Claudia mentions that they are paupers now. And why do you think that is? If they're talking about how they just gave all their money to the cab driver and now they have no money to return, and Jamie calls her Lady Claudia, why might she not like that anymore? Or why may she say, you can't call me that anymore? We're paupers now. So think about that. And I'm going to ask you to answer that question, obviously. Okay, so I think we'll stop there and you can look below and answer the questions that we just covered from what we read, all right? And we'll pick up where we left off together on Wednesday in our small groups, okay? So mark your page. I don't know if you still have your post-it marks. If you do, mark at the bottom of the page of 126. If you do not, perhaps you can put a pencil in this page and we'll pick up where we left off on Wednesday, okay? Take your time when you go to answer these questions. I want to know what you really think, and I would like you to answer them in complete thoughts and really think about what you're writing, okay? All right, see you on Wednesday.